folks. This, I believe, is very important for those who are very knowledgeable in biblical lore, biblical doctrine, and Christianity, and in fact those that would claim to be of the Jewish tradition but are in fact really more in tune with the biblical tradition. It's Kabbalistic Judaism, and what we need to understand is why it is, from what origin is it that the priesthood that declares itself above and beyond everything else that's alive in this world, what is it that gives it its ideology that makes it see itself in that way? And we have to go back to the Kabbalistic tree. So what they have basically done over these millennia is they've made the claim that they are the pure and everything else is with sin, is evil. So basically what they've done over these many, because they're so different, this mindset is so different than everything that you find in all cultures on this earth. These particular group of people are just so different to that they naturally see everything that's not their own creed as an opposition, which it naturally is an opposition, because it is our role down here to oppose this sadistic, evil nonsense that gives a lot of great men in history this false idea that they are superior and that they must then treat all those they see as beneath themselves as inferior. So it goes back to, we're looking at the Ein Sof, which is the tip of the tree, what they class as the Godhead. And from the contraction of the Ein Sof, Tohu and Bohu, chaos and void, entered this universe, as it were. Now, what they're claiming by that is the chaos and void is basically classed as everything that opposes this sadistic mindset. Okay, so straight away you can see that that actually is evil through the written word, through millennia, as a mimic, has always tried to create a doctrine in which the opposite appears to be true to the creatures that live in this universe. And they've done that to perfection in the use of the Kabbalic system and inverting it. So according to the Zohar, anything that's derived from Tohu and Bohu, chaos and void, is by definition classed as evil. Okay, now that's a very important foundation that you grasp, this is what they're operating to. So in essence, everything that they class as chaos and void has to be purged. It has to be eliminated. There are no halfway houses with this. As you understand this theology, it's very clear that this particular priesthood that operates this evil, this pure psychopathic existence, have one aim, and that is to purge the entire earth of everything it classes as chaos and void. And then what their basic premise is, to purge the world of chaos and void would allow their light to completely envelop the earth. But to do that, it has to get rid of everything else. Okay, so that's the basic foundation on which this Kabbalistic, I mean, it calls itself Judaism, this Kabbalistic Talmudism, which incorporates the Zohar. It takes a lot from the Midrash. Now, the Midrash is basically very ancient text. You may go back 4,000 years, perhaps, where this priesthood picked up all these documents that were a bit incoherent. And what they did then in the Midrash is basically make these documents that didn't make sense, that they were in possession of, They tried to make it make sense to their benefit. So that's basically what the Midrash is as a body of data. It's just ancient priesthood scribes formulating even older documents to sanction their old origin, their power, authority, etc. All building up to this false theology that everybody's living under today, that in fact we've got it all wrong for thousands of years, and that we should be raising to the top of the tree the pure evil. And that's done on a deception called scapegoating, whereby they despise the last destroyer, as they call it, of their temple, and they see that as Rome. I mean, to be quite frank, when you actually look into the history of the Roman wholesale takeover of Jerusalem, or Palestine as it was, then it's pretty clear that the priesthood themselves demolished the temple. They took all the stuff out of it first and did one. So, and destroyed the temple themselves because they didn't want anybody else to be using it. So they destroyed the temple. The priesthood itself destroyed the temple. But by some, obviously, word wizardry and lots of nonsense, they've managed to sink into the minds of the world that actually Rome destroyed it and it was a terrible thing. And so from that time on, they've been unable to sacrifice the goats in the temple because they haven't had a temple. So that's the foundation of why they're building a third temple, so that they can start again the sacrificial rites, which is very important in relation to scapegoating the sins of the priesthood and throwing it onto the Gentiles. Yeah, this is the origin of scapegoat, etc. And so the two work in tandem, but it is so important that people start to grasp the foundation upon which the priesthood that's controlling everything now, all global politics, global finance, our militaries, our politics, our local politics, as they move to undo everything that's been built outside of their system into the New World Order system that they will control fully. And as we've discussed previously, the spiritual format for that will be the Noahide platform, from which all temporal laws are going to emanate. And as I've said before, it is basically a license to massacre. It is a license to actually fulfill the requirement of purging and eliminating chaos and void, as they describe all those contrary to their own beliefs of superiority. So that's everybody. That's Islam, it's Christianity, it's Buddhism, it's Hinduism, it's every sect contrary to the actual priesthood ordained, inverted representation of what is the Kabbalah, the tree of life. So that's the foundation. Now, as I've said, Rome has been classed by this priesthood for 2,000 years as the ultimate destroyer of their system. And the name they give to that is Amalek. Now, the god of Amalek, or Amalek himself, is actually an archangel, Samael. Now, this is the origin of the term of describing America by Americans as Uncle Sam. Okay, so Samael, as an archangel, he is the destroyer of sin, of evildoers. That's what his role is in the pantheon of archangels. Now, this changed in the 5th and 6th centuries AD, and this is, of course, just after the laws of man, as Yeshua decried, became written doctrine and became the Talmud, the Talmudic system, which takes from the Zohar, it takes from the Midrash, as I've said. So these together are what are giving the foundation and authority for the priesthood, who's constantly being destroyed, because that is the role of Amalek, which is to destroy evil. And this system that's being implemented now, you can call it Zionist if you will, you know, it's Talmudic, but it's the inverted Kabbalic system. That is the evil that Amalek has been charged as an archangel to actually destroy. So you can now understand better why this priesthood sees America and Rome specifically as Amalek, Edom. Of course, the Edomite kings were the 8 kings that reigned in the land of Edom before it started to tie itself to the Israelite tribes of the day. So this is what preceded this system called Israel. Yeah, Jerusalem. All this nonsense that we are now having shoved upon us as its basis in what came after the Edomite kings, because obviously the Edomite kings destroyed this twisted, inverted system way back then. So they've always had a disposition towards what they class as the Edomites and Amalek. So Amalek, from their doctrine, is the god that they fear, or the archangel that they fear, because Amalek is the angel that is sanctioned to destroy their evil, psychopathic superiority system. That's its job, okay? Which is why they've been attacking Rome since that time, because they believe Samael is the guardian angel of Rome. And America, United States of America, of course, is the military aspect of Rome. That could have been said to have been Britain from the build-up of the Navy under Elizabeth I, financed by the House Palavicini of the Holy See on behalf of the House Farnese. So again, everything that Britain did, we can tie back to the families that are behind the Holy See, which they are banking families. This is who they are. They now control the banking system, and have done since they set it up. So it always goes back to those families in relation to all games going on in Western Rome, as it were, in contradiction to Byzantium Rome. Again, like I said, there's 2 Romes, and this again gets lost in people's grasp on history. So from that then, we can now understand why America, in the eyes of this priesthood, is classed as Edom. Now, nobody's going to dispute the fact that since the entrance into the First World War by America, brought about by the banking dynasties through the House Rothschild, who persuaded the War Cabinet to persuade the British government not to surrender in 1915 in the First World War, because the said bankers were going to bring in the Americans, because of course they created the Federal Reserve only 2 years earlier. So they had the central bank in the American continent, and were ready then to suggest to the War Cabinet in Britain that they could bring in America to the war, which they did. Of course, the kickback for this platform was that the British government had to be in full support of the coming state of Israel. And of course, the fact that they had America under their wing at that point enough to force them into the First World War also suggests that America at that point is also pretty much well under the control of this said banking dynasties. So this has been going on since, we can say, 1913, where they've actually got this inverted system running the financial systems of Europe, and now they've achieved America as of 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. So the system now is it's implanted over us. The next phase, of course, is to theologically transfer this dark system and mix it in with its opposite and the system under Samael, the archangel that oversees Rome. Now, of course, naturally, as Christianity was formed after the fall of the Roman Empire back in the 3rd and 4th centuries, as we understand, then Christianity was then classed as Edom. It was classed as a representation of chaos and void. So naturally, the hatred aimed at the Roman Empire then became aimed at Christianity. So there we go. Now we know in Christianity we're looking at Gabriel, we're looking at Michael, we're looking at the archangels there. But Samael now, in the eyes of this evil priesthood, has been transferred onto the new system that was born after the Roman Empire sort of fell apart, basically. So they shifted it into a theological control platform, and the empire moved to Constantinople. So Constantinople became the physical empire, and the church in Rome, well, it wasn't actually the church in Rome at that point mainly. It was carried out in the abbeys and the monasteries across Europe. They became the sort of spiritual system to oversee society. Now, if we're correct that Jesus' work was actually all about enforcing the law, which means removing the inverted Kabbalah as the actual magical system at the top level that was operating Christendom, then we could say that it was successful, because we did create quite a lot of good architecture, which shows that you're getting in contact with the higher frequencies, etc. And our society became rather trustful, and our High Commons was based in the doctrines of what you might call the New Testament, and thus we can say safely that the systems in the West were based on this new, sort of put back into its correct order, the Kabbalic system. And so naturally then, those operating the inverted system, which were ended in 70 AD, are the opponents in relation to that, because they want the inverted and their system back, because it serves them, the superiority complex, and the need that they have to have this world to themselves, which is what the rabbis currently coming out of Chabad Lubavitch are preaching to their faithful. So this is very real stuff. This is not to be taken lightly. Now, what I'm going to move to do now is try and show every American, every European, Scandinavian, and beyond that is operating under a Christian system or as a Christian mindset in its country. This is what you need to start to understand in relation to you have been coerced into serving your enemy, the inverted priesthood's theology, into supporting it. And the Schofield Bible was a serious piece of kit in relation to persuading the Protestant nations that they needed to come away from Rome and move into this inverted system. And that is obviously due to the Reformation that occurred centuries earlier. So we can see how this is playing out. It's a stepping stone move down, we could say, because, and we can see that today, that our societies and everything that we represent is being debauched and undermined and dismantled. But what it is that you really need to understand is that in serving Israel, you're serving this priesthood. Now, back to what we began with, the foundation of their theology is that anything tied to chaos and void has to be eliminated. That means killed, gone, off the face of the earth. So that ultimately, now that people can see that America is classed as Edom and the European nations, then what you can see is that all the wars that you've carried out for Israel has only been to undermine you so that you can be wiped off the face of the earth. It's so important that if people actually give this some thought as to what this video is actually going to try and relay to you, that you will cease forthwith to actually give it any more credence whatsoever, and you will be pulling down any of these politicos, these corporate leaders who are trying to do contrary and move to continue to support the state of Israel, because that is only something that represents this inverted platform, and you could say it's the springboard to make this madness go live and shift from political war to blood and guts war. And it's very important because it's get this and you will know why you should never support anybody that has dual citizenship in whatever nation they might be with the state of Israel. Samael, up until the 5th and 6th centuries AD. Okay, it's very important that we understand this. So previous to the 5th and 6th centuries, all the knowledge about Samael had him down as the 71st prince. Okay, I know you'll note that 70 is an important number to this other system. So to be the 71st prince, already you can see how they've put him outside their nonsense. He was the 71st prince in heaven and the guardian angel of the Gentiles. Okay, so that is how they depict Samael. After the 5th and 6th centuries, the rabbis shifted Samael into a demon, and then they appropriated Lilith as one of his brides. Now, Lilith, of course, was Adam's first wife, and she refused to lie under him, which is not surprising when you get into these Talmudic doctrines about Adam. You can see then how everything contrary to the Adam that they hold has to be shifted into the realm of evil, because obviously anything different to that system, the Talmudic system, which is being pushed today as the Noahide system, is the system for the psychopath. Okay, so everything that isn't a psychopath thus has to be exterminated. That is the real game going on here. Previous to the 5th and 6th century, Samael was the venom of God. He destroys sinners, and that comes from the Second Temple writings of this system. And I have to say again, this is what they have written. This is how they operate, and it's important that we understand where they're gaining their perceived authority, in order that they could have moved with this forever to ultimately destroy everything that is not classed as the psychopath. So it's not just the West. The West are being classed as Edom, but the Chinese are not part of this. The Japanese are not part of this. The elect are, the emperor systems, because it all comes from that side of things. But in general, the people themselves are not classed as the priesthood would claim you to be their version of what they claim to be the Jew. And that, so you can see that it's not just one section of society that's going to be eradicated. That it is for now, because they need each of the others to perform their duties in order to carry out this genocide. That's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long-winded thing, and each grouping that's affiliated with this system is obviously going to have to play its part. But it's very important right now that people start to realise why you mustn't support the priesthood that controls Israel. And as we've learnt in the videos in relation to the Alpha Lodge in Sydney actually claims to be the power that dictates Israel and what Israel carries out. That the Alpha system that's been incorporated into the churches is satanic. What these writings also say is that it was Samael that orchestrated the fall of Adam and Eve, and that he rode the snake, okay, so like as a camel. And some traditions have him as the father of Cain, who they then also say is the ancestor of Esau. Of course, Esau is the twin, the oldest brother of the twins, Esau and Jacob. And of course, Jacob tricked Esau from his oldest child inheritance. So straight away, Jacob, this creature, is a deceiver. And of course, this deceptive system, the satanic system, supports Jacob over Esau. When in effect, if you were to abide by the biblical tradition, trickery or not, Esau should have had his inheritance by definition of the fact that he was the eldest child. So straight away you can see again that this priesthood that's running this Talmudic system is based on a fraud from the get-go. You know, this is the things that you've got to pick out as protocols of the doctrine, i.e. you can't let these move out of sight, because this is the basis of the tradition. And so straight away there you see it's based in fraud, defrauding the biblical tradition. So it's separate from the biblical tradition. by definition of its own doctrine. As I've said in the introduction to this bit, the priesthood of because Samael is the guardian of Rome, he's just the enemy of the Orthodox Kabbalists. The Hasidic and the Kabbalistic Jews actually operate to the Zohar, and as I've said, they include the Midrash as well. And this is what forms the Talmud. And of course, the Talmud is the doctrine to sanctify the inverted magical system that the current Kabbalistic tree is actually being operated to. So it is important, and it all interlinks. God always destroys what is evil. That's written. So they've had to reverse it. So they've transferred all the evil that they actually do themselves onto the victim, which is what you see in politics today. It's what you see with the race card. If you are trying to debate these subjects, you're instantly classed as anti-Semitic, when quite clearly the priesthood that are running this system are not Semitic at all. You know, but the Semitic people have been pushed in front as a scapegoat. So because a lot of Semitic peoples are jumping onto this system, because people have been told that Samael, the 71st archangel who acts for God by destroying sinners, rightly so, has decreed him the enemy of this priesthood system, but got everybody else to believe that it's actually the enemy of them. Yeah, even to the point now that Christians see Rome as the enemy. Well, they have for a long time. But I don't think it's actually been so. It's the nonsense that the Vatican has done in historical terms. But when you look into those times, it's pretty, you know, you can just look at the Pope that's been put in place at that time, and they are serving the Holy See. It's one particular family of the Holy See that's got its Pope in. That's when they do ridiculous things, you know. And because, of course, they've given the Pope infallibility, you know, you cannot give anybody infallibility. It's just ridiculous. Game over the moment they gave that position, which, as we've also dissected in previous videos, the head of the Catholic Church is not called a Pope. It just isn't. Vicar of Christ and many other quite long titles, but the actual position as the head of the Vatican isn't a Pope. The Jesuits' head is a Pope, or known as the Black Pope. The only actual existing religion that does have a Pope as an official title is the Coptic Church, which is the Egyptian version of Christianity. So in these terms, Samael is Amalek. Amalek is of Edom. America has been classed as Edom. Okay? So basically, all the inhabitants of America, if you were classing yourself as an American, if you are a natural European, natural to the British Isles, Ireland, Scandinavia, Finland, yeah, all the Poland, and a big part of Ukraine, Lithuania, all these Eastern European countries were actually part of Europe before Stalin managed to expand the Soviet, what was going to become the Soviet Union empire, right across Europe. So if you are of that race, as a natural citizen of that landmass, this is who you are. You are classed by this priesthood as Edom, as the forces of Amalek. Amalek destroys this system because that's his job, to destroy evil. Okay, and the archangel, if we're talking archangels, is Samael. He's still an archangel, he's always been an archangel, but to these people he's the devil. That's natural, isn't it? It's natural. Because if constantly the battle is that the good always defeats the evil can only despise the good. Okay, so that's what they have done in relation to having the Western peoples, or non-Talmudic peoples, to hate themselves and move themselves in support of the evil. Because the evil has told them that they're the good guys and you yourselves are the bad guys because you've been getting it wrong from religion. That's just total nonsense. It really is. You know, you can see the destruction of the Western system as this priesthood force of moneylenders, of bankers, of black magicians, of the sacrifices of human beings, as they've entered any nation anywhere in history, but we're specifically speaking about the West, as that's got power in the West, this nonsense, this anti-life system has grown because it's a direct result of their works, their arts. And as it's enveloped the populations and nations, then it started to gain momentum amongst the nations, as it were, or the Gentiles. What is important is that if you are operating for Israel and you are not of the Talmud, then you are only being used in order they can annihilate you, exterminate you, purge you from the earth, in order they can fill the world with what they class as their purity. Okay, so that basically means that's why they have to get rid of the majority by a minority, because it's a minority of people who are sick and twisted and completely and utterly possessed by the Quilopothic realms. Okay, so that's the theology of the Kabbalist and the foundation of the hatred they have for all non-like themselves. So then we're dealing with Adam and Eve, because this is obviously how the biblical story gets trapped again into this other system. Now, to understand why that's so, you've got to understand that there are two Adams in this, in their system. There's the biblical Adam, and there are also, well, actually, let me start that again from the beginning. Let's get it right. There's two Adams, and they are distinct from the ultimate Adam, Adam Kadmon, okay, which is the origin of the transgender nonsense, because this guy's classed as an anthropomorphic being, but shows himself as a male, a man, okay? So there's your origin of this twisting the sexualities of people and insisting on this androgynous transsexual garbage. It's copying their version of what they call Adam Kadmon. So then, from there, now we have the two Adams, or the Adam that you're aware of through theology. We're looking at mirrors here, and as I've said before, this dark system mimics the creation. That's what it does. So we have a mirror image, but it's an inversion of the creation. So, according to the Talmudic law, which is taken from the Zohar, basically, and the nonsense that is the Midrash, there are two Adams. There is the biblical Adam, who's known as Adam Belial, and then there's the Jewish Adam, or Talmudic Adam, that they called Adam Helion. Now, in their terms, the biblical Adam is a wicked man, and thus an unnecessary man. Okay? So that's how they class the biblical Adam. And they go into copious rhetoric as to why he's wicked, why he has to be purged. So basically, from the core belief of this psychotic sect is that because the Torah is based entirely on the biblical Adam, then everything that comes forward from the biblical Adam has to be purged. So that's your Hebrews, that's your Persians, your Muslims, yeah, that's your Chinese, that's your Japanese, that's your Hindus, it's your Aborigine tribes across the world. That is what they class as the offspring of the biblical man, who they class as the wicked man and thus unnecessary. That is what they want to purge from the earth, remove it completely. Because they want to insert, as they call, the pure Adam, who they call the supreme man, and within whom, they say, are all the souls of the Jews, okay, and both male and female, but as androgynous creatures. So when you're looking at the transgenderism and this shift to shift humans into half robot, half AI driven monsters, then what you can see is their idea of pure is androgynous. It's the Baphomet. Okay, so this is the origin of the transgender and sexual debasement of the Gentiles, or the offspring of the biblical Adam. Okay, and they term it the twin souls. Okay, they're obsessed with twins. The Germans were the Germans weren't. The Nazis were, because of, again, the Nazis were this other system that took over Germany. So my apologies, it was never the German people. They got suckered into this, like the world's been suckered into it now. And let that be a lesson to everybody out there who's decried the Germans since the end of the World War II. You're all now suffering and experiencing exactly what was thrown onto Germany from 1923 to Hitler being enthroned in 1933. And by that time, they were in a position to worship. Okay, now, I look out there today and, you know, the public are rife for worship. I can see it now. You're so desperate and afraid and running around with these masks on and dancing to this nonsense. You are now ready for a hero. You're so ready for a hero. And this is exactly what they did to Germany. So you all need to start taking stock of that. Take responsibility, because you are now in that position where you are going to decide whether your nation goes the same way as Germany did, or are you going to try and fight it? You're in the same position, and you better start to get a grip of this, okay? So the intent is to reform humanity into a transgender being. They will class as a seed of the divine sparks. So that's the two Adams. So when the Talmudists speak of Adam, you think they're talking about biblical Adam. No, they're not. They're talking about their Adam. But as long as you believe they're talking about biblical Adam, you will work for them, because they've got the fiat currency. Okay? And they've got all the land and property that is ours. We have our estates, and they have held them back from us. So they have our assets also. So in essence, the biblical Adam and all his souls must be exterminated to allow the Ein Sof, the top of the Kabbalistic tree, to reform the world. So only the souls of Adam Helion be allowed to exist in the new world they are pushing to come. Back to the Kabbalistic tree, and on the inversion, as I've said, through their system of scapegoating the Gentiles through their own consent, the Gentiles are then classed as a corruption of creation, because obviously it doesn't work in sync with the evil, and are classed as the broken shells and the vessels which fill the Quillapothic. So this is Lucifer taking characters' souls that shouldn't be and putting them in the Quillapothic, which is the realm where these creatures exist. But they've been called out by men for greed, for power, for revenge, etc. over the millennia. So they've gained entry and they've reversed it. This is what needs to be understood by anybody who runs around going, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus, or I'm a Buddhist, yeah? Or I'm anything other than this evil Talmudic system. The kafir system today that's running around as the broom of the priesthood is Talmudic to the core. That's the connection between the kafir system and this priesthood. It's the use of the Talmud by Islam. If Islam just stuck to the Quran, it wouldn't be in the mess it's in, just as if the Christians have stuck to the New Testament, they wouldn't be in this mess. They wouldn't be in this mess at all. This is what's happening, and it's happening across the world. But more important, you need to understand that you've been deceived into believing the opposite of what is true. In so doing, you are treading the path as set by the priesthood through the inverted magic to carry out their will to annihilate the seed of the biblical Adam. All right. And that's really important that you understand that. Because if you're not of this cult of evil, this cult that does sin, as a normal, because they know they're going to transfer that sin onto the Gentile to be sacrificed to Satan, where's the judgment going, if you see what I'm saying? So that's how they've inverted the magical system. It's clever trickery, and people need to wake up. So I don't care who you are. If you're in America, you need to start understanding why your nation is called Uncle Sam, because he is the archangel that destroys evil. With that, till the next time.